You were at Jump for Jacqueline?
Yes.
Shut your face. I was the one who did 25 jumps in a day.
That's why I was like, you're
oh
so familiar.
God. Yeah, it was one of those things where I went into it thinking it would be a lot easier than it was. And I was just wrong. It was way harder. It was really a wonderful day. I would totally do it again, but I would go at it a little bit differently so that I had more energy toward the end of the day.
This is Mind the Ceiling, a show about trailblazing women who are shattering barriers. These are the candid conversations that dig into what the journey to finding purpose and climbing to the top of industries is like. All of the victories, hurdles, bumps and bruises, and celebrations along the way, and the tools you can use to be the next ceiling breaker. I'm your host, Tamara Lane. My guest today is Melanie Curtis. Melanie has jumped out of an airplane over 11,000 times. She has competed at the highest levels in the sport of skydiving, even setting world records with her team, and has worked around the globe as a headlining professional skydiver. Beyond that, she has authored 3 books on courage, positive thought, and the lessons she has learned in her journey. Melanie also co-hosts the Trust the Journey podcast and is the current executive director of the Women's Skydiving Network nonprofit. There, she co-founded the Highlight Pro Skydiving team, which inspires women and girls to be brave, and she uses it as a platform for social justice. In this episode today, we get deep into honest conversation about inner healing, facing your fears, and being an ally. Melanie shares her advice on overcoming impostor syndrome and perfectionism. She challenges societal confines for a career and reminds us all we can accomplish anything when we jump out of our comfort zones. And this is how she describes her journey to finding purpose.
Rigorous.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And why?
Because and this is sort of relevant to, I just published my Audible book, which is How to Fly Life Lessons from a Professional Skydiver. I'm not meaning to plug it, but that's what it's called. The Audible book is the entire anthology of 11 years of my writing, a column for a monthly column for a magazine, Blue Skies magazine. And in that column, I reflect over my life experience and this and that. Anyway, why I bring that up is that it's very clear where you can see my trajectory as a writer, certainly as a professional, as a skydiver, and absolutely as a person. So you see the whole hero's journey. And yeah, back then I might have thought my purpose was, I don't know, I can't even remember what I might have thought, winning a world championship in skydiving or something like that. Or I'm not even sure. I couldn't even tell you is I think very telling. And my story includes, as most people's do, humongous breakdowns, right? Which are what you barrel into because of your blind spots. And then you have major life challenge, major emotional challenge, and you have to slog your way through that suffering, and then take a real hard look at yourself and go, what did I bring to the table that got me here? And really start taking responsibility for yourself and the things that you haven't healed yet. And so I'm big on the bravery and the absolutely badass work it is to actually look inside yourself and do that deep work to heal ourselves so that we can actually, with real clarity, come on a show like this and say, my purpose is connection. There's no way I would have said that so clearly years ago.
And we are so excited to have her with us. We have many women who come to our show who clearly understand their purpose, but we know that our approach to life and its meaning is unique to our experience. One's purpose might expand and evolve with growth and healing. Here is Melanie's honest reflection of where she's currently at.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very difficult question, I think. I thought about it. Normally, I would say I don't like to even say that I have one, that it's, I think, more important to be taking purposeful action when we're in our lives because, oh, what is your purpose? It can daunt so many people such that they don't even start. They don't even look for something. They don't even begin to take action. But if I really think about it and am like honest with myself, I would say that my purpose is to connect. And so that is with myself, with my darkest corners, with people that don't look like me, with the stories of those that I follow, with my art, with my writing, with my work, with the people I'm out to care about and make efforts for in the world. Like all of that, I feel like comes back to the core calling to connection.
And how hard is it to do that and to like stay on that path?
I think it's depends on where you are on the path. You know what I mean? I feel like I joke about being a personal brand, ha ha ha, melaniecurtis.com, and how oddly uncomfortable that is for me. Like it looks very easy, I think, from the outside, but that calling is what drives that, to be seen, to courageously self-express. So all of these things, like to be bold, to be brave, those types of sentiments are underpinned by this bigger calling to connect. So is it hard to do it at the beginning? Hell, it's way hard because you are loaded up with limiting thoughts and fears and imposter syndrome and all this stuff. So you start out and you're just like terrified. So I think it's a lot harder for people who are starting out, and it slowly gets easier and easier over time. And this is something that skydiving very much showcases. It's something that being a public speaker very much showcases. It's something that being a very vulnerable writer showcases, is that over the years, it absolutely has gotten easier. It's not that the fear or the anxiety is gone totally, but it absolutely gets easier with iteration. So I talk about that a lot in terms of iterating over time.
Iteration is simply repetition with intention. It's a powerful tool to use when you are seeking to refine your path. The more you do something, the more you will discover if it is truly right for you. And sometimes we realize that it may not be the path we are destined to take. So we create our own.
What is it, the ceiling that you're breaking, right? Like you've done so many things, but what would you say your first memory of like the first ceiling you broke, or right now the ceiling that you're breaking? And it's almost like atmosphere that you're breaking.
Oh gosh.
To use some cliches.
Yeah. Oh man, the first ceiling, that's tough. I'll go with the ceiling I'm breaking now. And come back to the ceiling maybe I first broke. I mean, I guess the ceiling I first broke is being a woman in the very male-dominated sport of skydiving, and not even, again, having a low level of awareness to that very heavily male situation. There was awareness to it, but there wasn't really awareness to the limitations that would bring. It's sort of the quote that I love around inclusion. One of them is, just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it's not happening. And so that now that I've grown and evolved as a person and really started to look more deeply at things, at the world, it's so clear to see how the heavily male-dominated nature of skydiving and the heavily white nature of skydiving is something that we're working to change, and we're working to be in service to bring to make people and help, I don't know, not make people, but help people feel more welcome in that space, represent, voices of color and people of color in advertising for skydiving, and really make it clear that everyone is welcome. But yeah, the ceiling I'm breaking now is, I would say, very much with Highlight Pro Skydiving Team, which is an all-female professional demonstration jump team that's centered around social impact. So we are lucky enough to be generously funded by the Women's Skydiving Network Foundation. So as such, we can partner with organizations that are elevating women and that are championing conversations around equality and inclusion in all forms.
I absolutely love this. So the Women's Skydiving Network empowers women to be courageous and hopes to make the skydiving community more inclusive to women and people of color. Their team provides support, advice, and assistance for women interested in taking their first jump.
Talk to me about some of those conversations or what that looks like, because I know that you've done, is stunts the right word to promote this? And
demonstration jumps. Yeah, I mean, they're considered, I suppose, publicity stunts. But yeah, demonstration jump. So for example, in 2020, it was more stunts because there were no crowds, nobody could convene. Normally demonstration jumps are done in stadiums. So if we talk about representation, normally people in a stadium might see a demonstration skydive happen, but they don't ever see it when it's all women. There's only one other all women's team, I think. To my knowledge, there's only one other all women's team. And again, luckily, our team is supported such that we have the funds to partner with people that have social impact initiatives.
So just to pop out and give you a little bit of context, although women perform amongst top-level skydivers, they make up only 13% of the United States Parachute Association members.
So in 2020, we had our whole goal, our whole intent was to do a series of demonstration jumps or publicity stunts relative or supporting or championing, commemorating the 19th Amendment centennial. So the women securing the right to vote in the United States, mobilizing the vote for 2020. That was our goal. So we did a bunch of demonstration jumps in key locations that's relative to the women's suffrage movement and history. And we had our PR team get major press, and we got on as big a channels as we could. And we championed that conversation. So we worked with the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission in DC, so really aiming to make those partnerships, those key partnerships, such that we could reach as many people as we possibly could. So it's about those conversations, and it's about representation at the same time.
I have to ask, because what you're doing is you're so passionate about. But what you're doing is challenging on every level. How do you keep that drive within you? How do you keep going and doing it and kind of going past those barriers?
Yeah, great question. That's a great question. The truth is, so skydiving has been one of the great loves of my life. The great loves of my life. I joke it's one of the longest relationships I've ever had because it's true. It's true. I mean, we've broken up, we've got back together, we've gone the distance. And I say that because my professional skydiving career started as me being this very, very passionate young jumper. I found this thing and it blew my mind, and I was passionately in love with it. And as such, that fueled me for many years. It fueled me to study abroad in a sunny place where I could do my skydiving training. It had me leave New York City working for the investment bank to move to California so I could be in the sunshine. And it paid for all my competition years. It had me quit investment banking to run a drop zone for a number of years. It had me quit running a drop zone for a number of years so I could travel the world coaching professional skydiving around the world. And I did all of that. All of that was fueled very much by love. And then at sort of the peak of that bell curve, it's tiring. Now, and when I was kind of doing the traveling the world around the world as a professional skydiver thing, I also had sort of a realization that, oh, I kind of knew that if that was all that I did, I knew I wouldn't be happy. So at the same time, it's kind of a longer story, but at the same time, I found life coaching and I realized like, oh, this could be potentially another lane of my calling. And so I was bootstrapping that business at the same time. But relative to skydiving, the coming down the other side of that bell curve, you get tired because it's a lot of work to travel. The traveling lifestyle is very much put on a pedestal and it's wonderful. I would trade 0 days of my life so far. And I also acknowledge that when you travel like that, it's exhausting. So I was starting to just get tired of it. You know, I wanted to stay home more. I was getting kind of tired of doing the same work, even though I love the people. And I was getting to that point where I was just slowing down, you know, where skydiving itself wasn't doing it anymore, where my life coaching work was. So that's when my life coaching work, because that comes back to that connection. I'm with people. I'm connecting with them deeply. I'm helping them through genuine challenge. Like I'm wildly fulfilled by that still to this day. But how skydiving came back in terms of my enthusiasm for it and my fire for it is that we connected it to something greater than me. We connected it to something I cared about that is beyond just doing the same old thing. I say this all the time. I could totally care less. If we were jumping for freaking Doritos, I would give 2 shits. I would not do it. Like I wouldn't care. I would do it. It'd be fun to do once or twice, but then I would be over it. But because we're doing something that has a real mission to inspire women and girls to live bold, brave lives of their own design, that excites me because we're in the conversation on equality and equal pay and inclusion and what that looks like and allyship and what that looks like. That excites me.
As an activist at heart, Melanie Curtis is using her passion to advocate for her community. But where did all of this take root? We turn back to high school and Melanie's hometown to see how she grew into the woman she is today.
My life is comically reflected in my young life. I was the quintessential overachiever, the quintessential nice to everyone, talk to everyone, student council president, in MVP of every sport, in the special singing group, did the play, like I did everything. And part of that is reflecting my voracious desire to live life, to be having experiences, to be engaged in connection and human experience. And the other part of that is the absolute terror of not being perfect, you know, the terror of not being good enough, you know, of not getting 100 on my AP exam or whatever it is, you know? And so I don't even know where that came from. If I'm being super honest, you know, my parents are great. I grew up with 2 loving sets of parents because my parents got divorced, you know? And so I'm a child of divorce. I think that shows up mostly in my fear of disconnection. You know, I talk about this a lot relative to if I talk about connection being my deep purpose, the antithesis of that is present as a fear. So for a long, long time, I feared disconnection. I feared being rejected, as so many people do. I feared being alone, you know, of just being alone, not being in connection with people or not being good enough and earning my way as, you know, like just earning my way through being good at what I did, you know, that whole like performative protection mechanism that people get. I definitely had that. And now that I feel I've healed a lot of that, I feel glad, honestly, that I have a lot of high achieving strong suits, because now that I have the skills to be in self-care and I have boundaries and I have standards in my relationships such that I can really know when I'm being disrespected and not allow that. Like, now that I have all that, the high achieving side of me is really useful to have. It helps me really apply it to things that I care about deeply.
Well, and what do you remember something that shaped you now? So like, if you look back, is there something that you did that now you look and you go, I can see how that really makes a difference in my career and in my ceiling breaking?
Oh gosh, let me think. What shaped me in high school?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this sounds like a good thing, but I never, for some, this is very much connected to the high achieving part, but I never seemed to care about the intensity that I brought to things. Like, for example, I had the goal of getting a 5 on my calculus AP exam. And I went in every single morning at like 7 a.m. and I sat in my calculus room with Mr. Johnson, this old guy that never smiled. And I did problems, and I got extra mentoring, and I got extra teaching from him. And I was relentless. And that I guess learned that was okay, because I've continued to be relatively relentless on anything that I want to do, even though, of course, that has also led me to burnout as well. When unconsciousness is present, that relentless intensity can lead to burnout. But I don't know. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I mean, going to Australia, I moved to Australia in college.
And was that part of your college program, or did you just take a chance? And
No.
I was going to ask you, like, because I know your first jump was, you said, when you were 18.
Yeah.
And so you went to college, and was being a professional skydiver anywhere in your picture then?
No. I was I was very much still on the traditional path in college, where I was going to college, straight A's, doing my best, all the things, and starting to figure out, oh, okay, you can party and, have fun and just start to let off some steam. I decided to study abroad in Australia because it was an English-speaking nation and subtropical, so I could skydive. It was very purely driven by my commitment to skydiving more. Like, every adult decision I made from the moment my first jump happened to like forever was because of skydiving. But going that far across the earth, that far away from my family, away from everything that I knew, alone, taught me a lot more about my capability. It taught me a lot more about what I'm able to do. Like, I even only planned on being there a semester. And instead of coming home, I really didn't want to come home because I was skydiving and I had my thing and all these things. I ended up extending my plane ticket to the very last day until it expired. So I was like staying there a full exact year. And in the interim between my semesters down there, I got a job picking cherries. I was a migrant farm worker. I picked cherries, and I got a job at a vineyard where I trained young grapevines on the wire, battling poisonous Australian spiders. And
God.
I did that so I could make money so that I could continue to skydive. It was all for skydiving at that point in my life. And I was blindly driven. I mean, the thing I think that boxed out, because everything has an opportunity cost, right? So the opportunity cost of me being so relentless in skydiving is that years later, I was like, oh, dang, I really should spend more time with my family. Like, I miss my family. Like, I live in California. I live far away. I haven't been home in X number of whatever. I want a Christmas, but I don't ever really see my family. I started to really feel that. And I've since in recent years made very clear choices to reverse that, where I've reprioritized spending time with my family. And those are some of the best decisions I've ever made as well.
Melanie did everything she could to continue skydiving. It was in her blood. But then why go into investment banking after college? What prompted that decision?
Out of college, I didn't know. Like, I still was blinded by what society had told me was the right thing to do. The right thing to do is you go and you get a job. You just go and you get a job that pays you a lot of money, or hopefully you'd get a job that you like. I wanted to live in New York City. I love New York. It's my favorite city in the world. And I applied to a bunch of marketing jobs and I got a bunch of them and they paid nothing. They paid so little. I didn't know how I would even survive in New York. So my boyfriend at the time, his sister worked for this new branch of DLJ, Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, which was a small investment bank that ended up getting purchased by CSFB. Anyway, I went there. I interviewed just on a whim. I really was like, I'm not going to want this job at all. But the people that I interviewed with were awesome. And I really loved the idea of working with them. And it paid double what the marketing jobs were paying. And so I was like, you know what? I'll give it a chance. I'll give it a try. You know what I mean? But it was really about the people. If we, again, look at this common thread, it was about, I really like them. I'd like to work with them. And I'm so glad that I did, because I made a lot of money and I spent it all getting good at skydiving, this thing that was really my true passion at the time. And yeah, I could keep going. I could just go on and on.
Well, what was your aha moment for then making this huge life transition from what you called, the traditional path to then following I'm going to call it your purpose?
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to pursue skydiving. I knew that. And I was ready to quit, and I couldn't jump even as a fun jumper enough in New York. I was ready to quit my job and just move to San Diego so I could be in like a sunny place. Somehow, like through the HR conversations that I was having, the word got to this other broker who had a highly transactional business, and his assistant was going on maternity leave. So basically, he asked me to work for him, knowing that that I wanted to move to California because he was wanting to move there. So anyway, long story short, I do really well with his highly transactional business and he loves me, and we end up moving to California together. So I moved to California with the investment banking job. That was a true godsend because I was able to move for free and make tons of money, yada, yada. So I work for another 2 years at the investment bank with this other person who's a great person, making lots of money. I'm starting to compete. I'm jumping more. I can drive every weekend to a drop zone out in California because I'm there. I own a car now. It's a different lifestyle than New York City. But what was happening is it was so clear that I was becoming increasingly unhappy where I was, that I was a person I didn't even like. I would snap at my boss when he came at my desk. I would not really do much work. my work ethic was like really diminishing. I was not fun to be around. And that was just such a red flag. So much so that I got the job search book, What Color is Your Parachute? Because I'm like, I got to get out of here. Something's happening. So I bought the job search book, What Color is Your Parachute? And I only bought it because the word parachute was in the title, like completely obsessed. And a question in that book changed my life. And that question was, what would you do if money were no object? And I was like, well, duh, skydiving, of course. But XYZ, I had an immediate laundry list of all the reasons why I couldn't be a professional skydiver. I don't want to live in a trailer on the drop zone. I don't want to eat ramen noodles for my life. I want a house and a family, whatever, right? And I had this idea of professional skydiving couldn't include that. And it's because my answer was so instantaneous, I was like, it started to take the blinders and go like slowly open them up, where I was like, well, wait a second. This person's a professional skydiver and they don't eat ramen noodles and they don't live in a trailer and all this stuff. And so that opened my mind to the possibility. And at which point I immediately basically pitched my drop zone a job that they needed me to fill. And 8 months later, with preparation, I left investment banking and was a professional skydiver.
Wow. Talk about breaking ceilings and forging your own path. I want to just think about that for a second. Okay, let's dive back in.
Well, it's interesting because when I was kind of going over each of the things that you do, each one I thought of could be someone's greatest fear.
Right. Fair. I'll take it.
Because I was like, people get petrified of public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Publishing a book absolutely could terrify people. Jumping out of a plane, quite literally the absolute top of like what could cause someone fear. Why have you chosen to kind of harness that and take all of them on?
Oh God. It's such a great question. And I think I could only know that many years later as an older person who has now like basically witnessed myself living. You know what I mean? It's not like I had no consciousness over time. Of course I did. But if I look back and I think about myself as a really young person, because I started skydiving at 18 years old because it was in my family. My dad's a pilot. I was exposed to it at a young age. I sat through the first jump course a number of times. And so I get asked about that a lot, about that first jump and how did I do it? Why did I do it? Stuff like that. And the conversation about overcoming fear can also be a very cliche one. And the one about, oh, you look so fearless can also seem very cliche. And where it is derived from for me is I had so much anxiety as a young person. I had so much fear that if I didn't figure out how to get through it, I wouldn't have done anything with my life. I would have been held back in such strong, powerful ways. And it's like, I count myself so lucky that I was exposed to skydiving at a young age, because it's very clear to me when I look back that I could have jumped out of an airplane when I was 16 years old because my dad owned the place. And I sat through the first jump course a bunch of times and I just was too afraid. I wasn't ready. And then one day when I was 18, I basically said, okay, forget it. Tomorrow I'm doing it. Like I wasn't necessarily ready, but I was sick of feeling nervous about potentially doing it, but also wanting to do it. So it's not like I just didn't want to feel afraid anymore. I also wanted to do it. I wanted to have the experience, And so when I went up, there's this thought of, oh, I could never jump out of a perfectly good airplane, right? You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And I can test that there's a phrase missing from that sentence, is that I could never jump out of a perfectly good airplane and live. Like people are very understandably afraid of death or major injury when they're doing something where mortal risk is actually present. So when I jumped and I landed and I was not dead, right? It was like my brain was fundamentally altered in the sense that not, oh, you can do anything, hashtag life coach, but anything that I'm afraid of or I think I can't do, I have to at least question whether that's true or not.
I love that. It really puts us in a growth mindset. And growth is something we are always striving for here at Mind the Ceiling. So how does Melanie approach growth?
I say this all the time. Now that I feel like again, it's never, you're never done. There's no part of me that feels fully healed or all done, growth, I believe deeply, is a lifelong pursuit. We'll never quote unquote get there. And that's the beauty of life. And one of the most fun things about life is that the unpredictable nature of life is actually where the best stuff is found in my experience. But I would never be able to be leading the initiatives that I'm leading now if I had not done the deep work to clear my own road, to clear my own heart, to like really acknowledge the pain and the fear that gets in the way from us really being able to show up for both ourselves, but also for a larger thing, for humanity in a bigger way. I think about Highlight and the Women's Skydiving Network and those things that we do, and how, what is it to be a white ally? You know what I mean? What is it to be in allyship to LGBTQ plus? What does that even mean? Those conversations were largely out of my view until I healed myself. And it wasn't for lack of wanting to. It was just, I wasn't there yet. I did not have the bandwidth in my own psyche to get that I need to, if I want to be fully connected, I need to really be looking at the darkest parts of the world as well and being in service to those too.
It takes commitment to be able to deep dive into yourself and be open to continuous growth. Healing is a lifelong process, and it is not easy. Melanie agrees that sometimes we just need to seek support.
Yeah, I am a huge believer in professional help. I think people, if they're called to therapy, if they're called to experiential healing, if they're called to coaching, if they're called to whatever realm of healing that they're called to, I think that having that is really smart. If we don't have a support system, it's very difficult to do anything of consequence. It really is. I mean, you're just going to be sort of sustaining and surviving, I feel like, without a true support system. And so as a writer, I say all the time, I don't know who said this, but I love this quote. It's to write from the scar, not the wound. So as a public leader, a public figure, as a writer, as an artist, as a creative, as a person who's self-expressed in a public sphere, I never use my audience to heal me. I use my support system to heal me. I use my coaches, my therapists, my friends, my family, myself, my practices, meditation, self-care, like all of these things that are very buzzwordy in the personal development space. What are those things in action? You know what I mean? So like when people get into the conversation of like, oh, it's so annoying, I challenge people to the carpet when you actually are in action around self-care. What does that look like? When you're in action around mental health, what does that look like? It looks like you getting in the car or getting on Zoom and talking to your therapist. It gets you in your book to find a therapist. It gets you Googling ways to help yourself and support yourself. So all of those things I think really matter. And then it comes back to being brave enough to effect the new clarity that you have. And so like I did all that work to clarify, oh, I just don't want to be skydiving that way anymore. Just don't want to be doing that anymore. And I had to just own that. And it was scary. I was like, what if I fail? What if nobody will hire me anymore? What if my life coaching business goes down the toilet because I'm not skydiving actively anymore? All of those things were very scary at the time. But yeah, I mean, you just can't, you have to listen to what your heart is telling you. You have to listen to what you get clarity around and be brave enough to do that.
And I can only imagine that you faced a ton of challenges as you've kind of risen to the top. Do you remember an instance where you faced a challenge where you were like, this is it? I can think of dramatic, cases where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to move forward, that you faced, and then how you either overcame it or like just what happened. Did it just naturally solve yourself and you look back and go, I don't know why I was that upset about it?
Oh gosh. Well, there's a lot. And it's funny, when I was thinking about this episode, I was like, a challenge. I wrote in all caps, tons, like tons. Of course, there's a million of them. Gosh, I feel like something that's very relevant for where I am now. This was extremely painful, but so important as well, is that when I was beginning to step into allyship as a white woman who's trying to be of service to the skydiving community and just the world at large, using whatever I can, whatever power and resources I might have, and trying to really share those, right, with women of color, and sharing that platform, passing the mic, all those things that we hear about. I was trying to really do that. And suffice it to say, I screwed up, and it was excruciatingly painful to basically to have a learning moment as a white woman relative to women of color, and going, okay, like, and really getting the disparity in skydiving of how it's so predominantly white that it's the optics of how we are lifting women of color will matter. And so I'm so grateful for that lesson, even though it was excruciatingly painful. But also, what was amazing about it is that my clarity on being of service to equity and inclusion, to being an ally and being a white ally, I was so clear that I am continuing, that I am learning from this, and that I'm going to continue listening. I'm going to continue learning. I'm going to continue showing up in spaces where people don't look like me, and listen and learn. And I'm going to continue to try my best to use the power and resources I have for elevating, to elevating all people around me. So yeah, that sucked. It was really hard.
Melanie is doing something incredibly important, which is continually opening a space so that people can have the much needed conversations that foster change within reluctant industries. Although it is impossible to compare her experiences to those that women of color face daily, it's important to recognize that we can all suffer from burnout.
You found a new driver to overcome burnout. Explain to me that a little bit more. Like, how did you do that? Because so many people, and especially right now, everyone is trying to figure out how to overcome burnout, even from things that they love.
Have you read the book Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski? It's phenomenal. It talks about how you process stress. Like, I highly recommend that book, but it talks about burnout being when we take on stress and then we don't process it through our bodies. So like, I'm very big on our bodies hold our stress. They hold our emotions. If we have not processed them, they are still in there, and that holds us back in a huge, huge way. So to tell you the actual story of, and this is very much shows up in all of my writing and my new Audible book and all this, is when I was at the pinnacle of my skydiving, I'm starting to come down the other side. So I'm burning out from the work. I am having escalating fear because there were a few accidents in the sport relative to people that I loved and lost. So that was terrible. Grief around loss. And my personal life basically blew up and I ended up getting a divorce. And so I had all of this stuff happening all at the same time. And I recognized also that because I was so taxed emotionally, burned out, heartbroken, in grief, I knew I was also unsafe in the air. That I was like, I gotta sit down for a while. I gotta stop. I gotta pause on skydiving, period. And so I did that. I knew that was the right decision. And so that added the fourth thing of also losing the strongest piece of my identity. Melanie Curtis, professional skydiver. I know who that is. That woman is confident. She knows what's up. She is strong. Melanie without skydiving, who the hell was that? I was doing this passionately since I was 18 years old. And so to go through that real dark night of the soul, as it were, is a very powerful, painful period, but it delivered me certainly clarity on myself. And again, I'm still in my own healing work around just life in general, all the kinds of ways that we can heal ourselves. But it also gave me really strong clarity about how I wanted to engage in the sport of skydiving. And it was very clear to me that I only was going to jump when I wanted to, period. Sounds so simple, right? But it's a big deal when you're a professional and all of your professional success feels like it's built on this one part of your professional career. It's a truly brave move to be like, I'm not going to make that be my thing anymore. I'm going to do only what I want. And honestly, as soon as I was brave enough to really embrace that part of that change in my career, everything good came to me again. You know what I mean? People wanted, like the people that wanted to hire me, they hired me for the way that I said I would coach, you know, and then this opportunity. Yeah. So I could go on and on, but.
Bravery can be diving from a plane, or in this case, it was the decision not to. Melanie's ability to trust herself is the reason why she's the pro skydiver she is today. We end with a few awesome nuggets that she's learned on her journey.
What I love that I'm hearing, and one of the things I love through these interviews is hearing the trends. And like with you, it's on your website, you know, fearless, conquering fear, but there's something about that as we are learning and we're growing in our careers and we're growing and breaking barriers, about learning that we need to take chances and that there will be mistakes along the way and there will be bumps and bruises. But if we don't learn what we're supposed to.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and kind of just the significance of how it's been in your life.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, the only way to get over perfectionism or imposter syndrome is to actually step into the spaces and the conversations that you are afraid of. Period. You know, you have to be in action. I'm a big proponent of learning from experience. Like, I do not subscribe to failure. I just don't believe it's even a thing. I feel like it's just experience and lessons and living. You know, you're being a human. Of course, we're not going to be perfect. You know what I mean? And relative to showing up in rooms where we think we don't belong, or we think we shouldn't be, or we think people are going to find out that we don't know what the hell we're doing. The truth is that nobody really knows what they're doing. I've learned that if I know anything from sitting on the other side of life coaching calls for 14 years, and being on them myself as a client with my coaches, it is so apparent through all the stories. And I say this with love and honoring of the humanity that I get to hear and feel with my people, is that we are all really doing our very best. We think everyone else has it all together when really that's just not the case. And once we let go of the need to be perceived as having it together or perfect or whatever in any lane, so this is the thing, is like, this is the same when I was a young writer. It's the same when I was a medium skydiver. It's the same today when I'm trying to show up in allyship. It's the same. And so like, that's the thing, is like this idea of really being okay with screwing it up and having a rigorous, ferocious commitment to learning and growing.
Well, and so the journey and just knowing yourself and listening to yourself.
A willingness to act.
And a willingness to act.
Yeah.
100%. Well, so if you could go back and tell yourself anything at 15 while this journey started, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. To be honest, what I would tell her is I would cuddle her. I would put my arm around her and I would say, it's going to be okay. I would encourage her. I would have her know that it's going to be okay. You don't have to be so afraid, that like we can validate feeling fear all day long. And at the same time, it really sucks to feel it. It's painful to feel it. It's painful to be stuck in anxiety. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I champion people to move into things, to take action, to exposure therapy themselves in their lives. And encouragement and support and reassurance also really does matter from those that are around us. So that's what I would tell her.
I absolutely loved this conversation and gained so much on how to overcome fear and the importance of trusting yourself. If you think about it, these two things tie into every industry. Even though the stakes are higher when you're jumping from 12,000 feet, the concept is the same. When you take calculated, big chances, you can achieve incredible heights. And that is it, the unfiltered, undeterred journey of Melanie Curtis, a trailblazer bringing social advocacy to the forefront of sports with bravery and style. And now it's time for the Mind the Ceiling Mindful Minute with Anika Uden, our podcast's associate producer and potentially your company's next CEO. Anika, take it away.
To start off, what book has impacted you the most?
That's pretty much impossible. I'm voracious for Audible books. But one of my most favorites is honestly Principles by Ray Dalio. Meaningful relationships, meaningful work. I think that is a really powerful, powerful sentiment. And I love it. It really informs my choices as an entrepreneur now as well.
Who is your most influential role model?
As a writer, I am wildly inspired by Elizabeth Gilbert. Her example of being courageously self-expressed, like her book, if we talk about books that impacted me, her book absolutely impacted me in a huge way. Eat, Pray, Love in 2007. I read it. I felt so supported.
What characteristic do you love the most about yourself?
I love my sense of humor the most. I believe love and hilarity are the two most important things in life, in that order.
What do you do to relax or chill out?
Nothing. No, that's not true. I actually, believe it or not, I go to the gym or I go hiking, or sometimes I'll just watch a show while I digitally putter. I'll meditate. There's lots of little things that I do to chill out, but a lot of times I'm, again, bringing my intensity to everything that I do.
Get that. If you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
I think it would be to heal people, and if I think about being able-bodied, I feel like I would want to help people heal.
I guess to wrap things up, the last question I have is, what is the next ceiling you want to break?
Specifically with Highlight, our demonstration jump team, I would love to see our team, our all-female team, being hired by large brands to carry their message, and also at the same time be representing women in sports, women in fringe sports at the same time. I think it's just such a male-dominated space that I would love to see all women's initiatives being given those bigger platforms.
I can't wait to see you do that.
And that is our show, Mind the Ceiling. And here we don't mind the ceiling because it is meant to be shattered. We're here for you, so please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to us. Follow us on social media and share with your friends. And we'd love to hear from you. Hit us up on Instagram to ask our guests questions or just celebrate your successes with us. We'd love to cheer you on your journey. And with that, what makes us excited about the future?
You know that Rumi quote where it's like, there's a field, I'll meet you there?
Yeah.
I think I'm not going to get the quote right. But now that I've lived long enough, I feel like I really get it, that you can just make stuff up and make it happen. That excites me to no end. I think when we're younger, we think doors are closed to us. We think that we can't do that. We're not good enough for that. That's this, XYZ, ABC. But now that I've lived enough and done some of the things that I've done, I know that you can just decide, you can just create something, you can have an idea, and you can just start moving toward it, and you can create some of the coolest things possible. I mean, that's why I became a professional skydiver. That's why my column exists, is because I wrote an email to the new magazine people and I said, hey, what do you think about a maybe skydiving and life coach column? And they said, yes. 11 years later, it's my book. And it's crazy what can happen when we just go toward an idea and we don't stop ourselves.
Special thanks to my amazing team, Associate Producer Anika Uden, Editor Michael Coleman, writing by Brianna Puebla, and my Chief of Staff, Sky Gadula.